really working with them. And just like as an organization, truly acknowledging that lived experience gives families and children some perspectives that need to be part of how you do business. It's also understanding that families are the experts on experiences and needs, and that families belong at decision-making tables so that they can give real-time input on changes and decisions. And that this culture can't just be in leadership, can't just be in frontline workers. It really has to permeate all the way through. Okay, Miranda, you can go ahead and switch. And as part of like when we were interviewing people and looking at organizations we knew and talking to people in the field about what they thought would be most interesting and doing some research, what kept floating to the top are a bunch of really similar values. And this isn't our whole list, but it is a good sampling of the kind of things we saw, which were just authenticity, that they were really presenting themselves in a way that was very transparent and open to the people they worked with and to the community. They showed a lot of respect and empathy and responsiveness to the families they worked with. They collaborated both within their own divisions, with other organizations like all of you are doing, and then with the families to really do the best job of representing family voice as possible. They were also adaptable. They were willing to try new things for families or with families and individualize their services a bit sometimes. And at some point, they all kind of led into advocacy, to really helping families advocate for themselves, whether it was within the system or even politically advocate for themselves at some level. So, and also just advocating for their clients in a way that was different and very based on their clients' experiences and expressed needs. So, on to you, Miranda.
Okay, I will dig in here. So we got so excited about this project that we created a manifesto, and it's based on 3 tenets, and I'll dig a little bit into those, but they kind of explain why we thought this was a good idea and why we should become family voice curious. First tenet being that it's best practice. Research that we did shows that outcomes improve for families and systems when families are engaged as decision makers, as advocates, and as partners. We also found that programs that involve their target population in all levels of development, implementation, and improvement of programming have greatest impact and better outcomes. And also that best practice includes integrating families and their feedback into program planning and quality improvement. Another tenet, it's often required. Many funding and oversight agencies now mandate some level of family engagement, and we really wanted to take that beyond just checking a box and moving into active engagement. So one example of that is, let's say you have invited families to an organizational meeting, but people aren't showing up. So kind of digging into what barriers might be to families showing up. Maybe it's timing of meetings, maybe they need transportation, childcare, a meal, and kind of like really digging into how to get families at these important meetings or places to engage them. And another tenet is it's transformative. Organizations overall will change for the better. Practice of family engagement helps to create a culture of growth and empowerment within the agency and within communities. And organizations that engage families become part of a larger movement to positively address systemic issues that negatively impact families. So after we did this initial research and wrote our manifesto, it kind of dawned on us that our family voice curious principle kind of naturally aligned with trauma-informed care and cultural humility. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. So these are SAMHSA's 6 key principles of trauma-informed approach, which is kind of the gold standard right now for trauma-informed care. And why this is so important is trauma is so prevalent in our society, and According to the National Council for Behavioral Health, 70% of adults in the US have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. Additionally, in public behavioral health, over 90% of clients have experienced trauma. So the likelihood that families and children have these experiences is very high. And some of our tenets align very much with these trauma-informed, like building trusting relationships that are based on collaboration and empowerment, giving choices whenever possible, and allowing the clients to determine what their needs are. Also very important, giving attention to cultural, historical, and gender issues. This ties directly into family voice curious principles of addressing social and cultural needs, and having an awareness of issues related to race and ethnicity that may further compound issues for families and children. Which this ties directly into our next topic on cultural humility. So the National Institutes of Health defines cultural humility as a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique, whereby the individual not only learns about another's culture, but starts with an examination of his or her own beliefs and cultural identities. So this really requires a lot of personal reflection and inner work to recognize our own biases that we may have about different cultures, and kind of overcome how those may impact the services we provide. We've got a little video that I hope will work that goes into this idea more. Can everyone hear that?
Cultural competency and cultural humility. You may have heard these terms
A little quiet.
in the context of healthcare settings and not quite understood them.
Sorry, it is playing. Is that right?
Let's go over what these terms mean and how they apply to everyday life. To be culturally competent is to learn about other cultures, control your biases, and adapt your behaviors and communication style considering the background of people around you. The goal of cultural competency is effective and informed interaction across various cultures. At face value, cultural competency sounds ideal, but it may actually lead us to rely on generalizations about certain groups rather than recognizing the uniqueness of each individual. We also have to ask ourselves, is it realistic or even possible for people to learn everything about other cultures and become completely bias-free? That's where cultural humility comes in. To be culturally humble is to be aware of social power imbalances, respect other people's values and beliefs, and continuously reflect on your own biases. With cultural humility, there's no expectation that you memorize everything there is to know about other groups. Instead, it's a lifelong process of asking yourself how your own biases might impact the way you treat and understand others, alongside work to minimize that impact. Cultural competency is a goal, while cultural humility is a mindset. Let's go over a few ways to practice cultural humility in our daily lives. Recognize that no culture is superior to another. Become comfortable with reflecting on and acknowledging mistakes you've made. Be honest when you're not sure about something. Learn about other cultures with the awareness that you'll never reach perfect understanding. Ask the people in your life if you can have open discussions and hold each other accountable during your learning journey. The great thing about cultural humility is that it acknowledges that no one can get it right all the time. In fact, a key component of cultural humility is being open about what we haven't learned yet. Although it can feel really uncomfortable to admit when we're wrong or don't know something, that vulnerability leaves room for us to continuously learn, grow, and promote equity and inclusion in our communities.
So I really liked that video because it dives into kind of tying together cultural competence and cultural humility. Competence being the goal, but realizing that we need to have humility along the way as we learn about cultures that are different from our own. So I wanted to leave you all with some action steps. One being just acknowledging the importance of language that we use. I think oftentimes we might hear deficit-based language, and something that ties into Family Voice Curious is using more strengths-based language. So some of these examples, instead of saying a child is acting out, maybe we use the child appears to have unmet misunderstood needs. Yeah, just something that we can easily apply to our everyday conversations and languages that with families that will open us up to having more curiosity. And I will pass it back to Robin.
And I remembered to unmute myself, yay! So as we got to this point of kind of thinking through what it meant to be Family Voice Curious, we were back kind of at the spot where we thought we had started, which was, okay, you know, how do you do it though? You know, how do you make it happen? So we really thought through and researched, how do you become Family Voice Curious? How do you act that out? And Miranda, go ahead and switch. And so we looked for answers by looking for people who are already doing a great job, because there's, I'm sure, tons of examples around the state. We identified about 5 of them. The original goal was to go visit them, maybe take some video, write up something about everybody, and then COVID hit, so we didn't get very far. But we did locate and highlight a couple on our website. And by the way, all these documents that are in this are links, hyperlinks to the documents as well. So when you get this, you'll be able to go straight to a document if you want to. And so, but as we were looking around and calling people around the country and doing some research locally, we found out that the bad news is it depends on the organization, how Family Voice Curious works. But the good news is it depends on the organization, because as we were, you know, it sounds so nice to be like, well, write this into your policy and take this step and do this particular type of, you know, feedback mechanism, and you're going to be golden. You're going to be Family Voice Curious and have great family engagement. But that's not how it works. But the good news is that's not how it works, because organizations are so vastly different, both in their possibilities and their barriers. You know, because barriers are real. There's legal restrictions, there's, you know, paperwork problems, there's all kinds of stuff that can make it really hard to implement certain kinds of Family Voice Curious, you know, procedures or policies, or just how you structure your work. And so what not having one answer does is let every organization kind of put the emphasis where they need or want to. So you can find those areas where you have champions, or where you have a process that's just ripe and ready for change and doing something different, or a pain point. You've got a real pain point where families don't engage for some reason, or you're losing families, and you need to do a better job. So you can identify those areas and really work with them and still create a really solid, good Family Voice Curious culture, you know, get it started, and also some really good family engagement pieces along the way. The 2 that we have put together look really different. The Families Leading Our Community is the 0 to 5, part of the 0 to 5 collaborative in Butte Silver Bow. And it's a group, I think, almost entirely made up of families in the community that make up the subgroup and do a lot of planning and with the whole collaborative. And then the food bank and community center in Missoula has really committed itself to, for one thing, it's like their clients often volunteer widely in the organization and are hired often in the organization, and they've created some lived experience groups to help work with in the community. And they've also really committed to having, for instance, their board, I think, is going to be 30 to 40% lived experience very soon here, if it isn't already. So they've kind of, you know, approached it in a somewhat different way that's been really powerful, and they feel like it's been really transformative to them. The idea is that at some point we'll actually have this stuff on video so they can tell their own stories, but for now, this is what we got. And we know that there's lots of other organizations too that we'd love to hear about, so please share if you've got some good examples for us. Randy, go ahead and do the next slide. All right, so getting started, what's a good place to start is a question we've had several times. And we have what we call a toolkit on our website down to the left there that just provides resources and references and some ideas and ways to think, and our manifesto and all kinds of stuff on the website to kind of help you start your own conversation and thinking. And then also within that toolkit, on the right there, you can see there's a section of organizational self-assessments. These are national organizations that have created them. They don't use the term family voice curious, but that is what they're getting at in all these cases. And we have 3 different assessments with most of them have a guide along with them that talks about ways you can interpret your findings, because it's a great place to start a conversation within your organization or with your board or with staff, however you do it, to go through and really talk about what your organization is doing in these different ways. And I like having the choices too, because you can find one that you feel like fits your organization best as far as the kind of work you do, but also as far as where your staff is with these issues. And a lot of times too, it gives you some ideas. You're like, oh yeah, we could do more work with families in this particular area, you know, just things you haven't thought of before. Go ahead and do the next slide, Miranda. All right, so here's our links to our online presence, the Family Voice Curious page, and then just the Center for Children, Families, and Workforce Development page in general, which has lots of resources about all kinds of different things. And we, go ahead and go to the next one, Miranda. And then there's our contact information. We would be happy to talk to you at any point. We are learners on Family Voice Curious as well, but we would love to help other organizations get started in thinking and talking about it. So, and we can also provide some ability to do some research and such for you. So if you're interested in further work on Family Voice Curious, we would love to be part of that if you would like us to be. And yeah.